Hello and welcome to another episode of All the Things. I am Monique Duson.
And I am Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom.
And we are glad to have you back actually doing this with us. I know you're not fully back, but it is good to sit next to you.
Let's see if I remember how to do this. Is this like riding a bike?
We'll see. We're going to keep going. we love you, but we'll keep going. It'll be all right. You'll catch on. It'll be okay. How have you been?
Well, a lot's happened to me this year. A lot. So, finished my Doctor of Ministry and certain child of mine got married last weekend. It's been a lot.
Yes. It was a great wedding. And if anyone has followed me on my cheeseburgers and dresses fiasco, well, that is the wedding that I was preparing for.
On Facebook.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to give a big shout out to our moderators. Thank you so much for keeping the peace in the chat. And jump right into tonight's conversation. We are having a conversation, a back to school conversation on all things updated problems in public school education.
Yeah, it's been probably maybe a year and a half since we've had a conversation about public education. It's sort of a theme, an on again, off again theme on the show. And but our friend Kelly Ski is back with us tonight to give us some updates about what's happening, because I've heard while I was, kind of behind the scenes, I heard that woke has been stamped out.
Well,
woke's all gone. This is what I heard.
Woke has been, readjusted and renamed. I don't know if it's been stamped out.
Well, we're going to find out tonight.
Well, hopefully we get there. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But the goal, I wanted to start out just by sharing, what is the goal of this? Like, are we just getting on here to bemoan public education and things like that? That isn't it. The heart of this conversation really is to help equip parents to understand what are the things that are happening in the public education sphere that will impact your child. And it may impact your child without you knowing. I have had many conversations recently with parents who have kids in public education, and they're like, no, I don't really know that that's that real, or I'm not sure that's that important, or my kids don't really want to go to a Christian school or to a charter school or be homeschooled. And at that point, I think that it's important that we as the adults remember we are the adults. And so in being the adults, we have been given a God-given charge to raise our kids and to raise them well. Raising them well means raising them in the admonition of God, to understand who God is and what his precepts are, his tenets, his laws. How do we live to honor and please God? It is my personal opinion that when we put our kids in public school, that kind of comes in conflict, because many of the teachers teach them from a different understanding. Now, I know right off the bat, there are some who are like, well, I can't do it. I can't afford it. I don't have time. I have to work.
Or my kid's teacher is a Christian.
My kid's principal is a Christian. There's all of those things. My heart, again, in having this conversation is just to put it out there, help you understand, okay, I know you have these concerns, these thoughts, what is really happening in public education? And is it enough for you to say, you know what, I really don't want my kid to be trapped in that cycle, or to, experience some of the things that are being pushed on students in public school. I think it's a worthwhile conversation, whatever you choose to do with your kids' education. I am not here to condemn you, but I do want to equip you. And so that's our heart in it.
Yeah, I think multiple things can be true at the same time. We bless all Christians who work in the public school system and try to be salt and light within that system, be a stand for truth and reform and helping kids. And we really see those people as missionaries, that they are being deployed into a lot of dark places. And that's fantastic. We need Christians working and being salt and light in those institutions. We also take the position that parents are in charge and ultimately responsible for their children's education, no matter where they're getting educated, that they have a God-given responsibility to make sure that their kids are having growth in their worldview as a Christian, and to be sober-minded about the challenges of that when their kids are enrolled in public education. Now, I know somebody's going to come in the comments when you can say like, my kids go to rural school, or I live in a red state. These things aren't an issue in red states. We want to give information to help you understand and evaluate the reality of where your school district really is, how to research it, how to find out.
Yeah. So our guest is the one and only Kelly Ski. And like you said, she was here with us about a year and a half ago. And if you ever have a question on anything related to many things, but especially education, she is such an awesome resource. You can actually follow her on Twitter at Kelly, KELLYSKE, Kelly Ski. All right, let's welcome Kelly on.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Good.
It's nice to be back. Can't wait to see you again in person.
I know, right? Thank you so much for having this conversation with us and for joining us. I know it's going to be very informative and helpful. Why don't we, since it's been a while, why don't we start out just by having you introduce yourself? What made you get into all things public education?
That is really what it started with, was a personal experience. I had grown up in one school district. It was a very small school district. And later in life, when my children were in that school district, it started with my son. And I had been advocating for a little bit more recess time and lunchtime recess as well, so that the kids could run and play. I was observing that my son was coming home and he was choosing between eating lunch versus being out to play because he didn't feel like he had enough time. And as I volunteered more, I saw that was consistent, and it wasn't as much playtime as even I had had when I was a child. So ultimately, what started as me advocating for more lunch recess turned into me learning that the school district had actually started a mindfulness moment at the school. The students were every day sitting for the last 10 minutes of lunch recess, and the principal was leading them into a mindfulness meditation moment using a Tibetan singing bowl. And initially, this entire story in its longer version ended up being one area of research. I had met with the principal, and in that meeting, I got the impression that the principal was asserting himself as an expert over my child, even over my parental authority in my child's life. And so I knew in that moment I needed to learn what this program was, social emotional learning. I needed to learn what the whole child was and that philosophy. And then I needed to understand the curricula that he had mentioned he was also going to be bringing in. So it started there, but then what happened is it just never stopped. And one subject led into another subject and led into another. And to this day, I'm still researching education. And my hope is to use the ability that God's given me to research and find these things to help other parents understand, and teachers and policymakers understand difficult topics, and be able to then make the best decisions with the information and resources they have.
And you are definitely an important and talented researcher. I'm going to encourage people to give you a follow on X. In my opinion, you're in my top 5 follows on X. Your posts are important and helpful and relevant, and I really appreciate them. I think let's just kind of recap some territory that we covered last time so we can dig deeper into it this time. But just recap for us the whole social emotional learning, whole school model, like that whole enchilada, because it's, while some people may know these terms, other people may not, they may recognize it once you start describing the dynamics of what this framework is, this model is that is now guiding a lot of what's happening in public schools.
Yeah. So, one of the things to anybody listening that I always encourage with these new terms is when you're learning not just this new terminology or a new idea, it's also important to understand a lot of these are very carefully crafted ideas with marketing, public relations, communications in mind. So, what I often tell any audience member is to take into account not just hearing something, but imagine that you're working for a marketing company and you're hearing pitches from different people about a commercial that's going to play for maybe a minute and a half during the Super Bowl. You have a huge budget and you're looking for that winning commercial, that winning pitch. And many of these ideas that we're seeing today in education, they're marketed phenomenally well, but that also means that there's more than meets the eye. And that's what happened when I started researching. I was told in that first meeting with the principal that there's a new program and it's called social emotional learning. And what I was told is that it is rooted in neuroscience. So immediately that sounds really impressive. And I was told that students today are facing more difficulties than ever before, which initially I caught that, and I love studying history, and I didn't entirely buy that because I know in other places of the world and throughout many other seasons of world history, US history, there's been other things that people have faced. It's not to discount today's hardships that people do face, but that particular statement caught me a little bit. But ultimately, social emotional learning, I was told, is a means to educate the whole child and to help calm kids down at the end of lunch recess so that they can go back into their class. I was told it was kindness, that it was conflict resolution, that it was a means to operate a nice community in the school system. All of those things sound wonderful. But is it all that there is? And is it entirely true? Well, social emotional learning is a concept that had been growing out of really a lot of history. It officially started under the name CASEL, which is an acronym, CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. This occurred back in 1994 at this place in Michigan called the Fetzer Institute. And the Fetzer Institute has a long history in and of itself, which incorporates a lot of various spirituality beliefs. And John Fetzer himself, who had owned the Detroit Tigers, who had also started the Fetzer Institute, was a devotee of a woman who had a very unique Luciferian belief system, religious system, and even theosophical. So those beliefs in some ways, in that different, unique spirituality, are a piece of the puzzle that is important to note. And I often tell people this: if we have something coming into our lives, let's say you're going to go purchase a birthday present, you might go and look at reviews before you purchase that. And you might see what different companies sell the product. You might look for the one with the greatest reviews that has the greatest quality for the price, all of those things. I think it's important that we analyze educational issues and topics in a very similar understanding, okay, who put this together, what may have been some of their belief systems in constructing this particular thing. So social emotional learning is described as a means for encouraging a new school climate, a new school culture, and developing new, what they call competencies. So different ideas that students are measured by and assessed in as far as their ability to work with others. Self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness are the 5 main competencies that are discussed in the framework Now, what's a framework? I do want to mention this because when I first started, I didn't know what a framework was in the education realm. A framework offers like a guidance document. It's not necessarily 100% mandated in every situation. For example, you have a health framework in your state education department. And typically, a health framework is a guidepost. It gives teachers kind of an overall, we'd like you to cover these topics. It's not mandatory, at least yet. In some cases, they end up making some of these mandatory, but ultimately, social emotional learning was marketed these ways. However, many social emotional leaders have since and have written about in the past openly admitted that it is a program to insert new values into a child. So it is a values replacement model in many ways, the way it operates. And we are moving into a direction where social emotional learning is not just in the school, but it's also in the sports teams. And it's also encouraged in the workplace and out in the community. Social emotional learning, for example, one program that I had researched was called Mind Up. And I had a faculty member admit to me that Mind Up curriculum from the actress Goldie Hawn, again, they said it was created with neuroscience in mind, but they did tell me it favored Buddhism. And then I was told that teachers and faculty go through a training, and within that training, they are instructed and provided small Tibetan singing bowls, and that the students may meditate in the lotus position in their classrooms up to 3 times a day. There's definitely a spiritual aspect to these practices. I encourage anybody listening who might decide to take a note or look back. At Columbia University, there's actually videos, and you can watch on YouTube, Spirituality and Education, oftentimes funded by Fetzer still, or also Rockefeller. And so we have to understand these are groups that are also trying to change dynamics of spiritual beliefs and introduce some of these practices into society through the school system.
You hit on a really good point that, education, I think for so many still today, people think of it as reading, writing, and arithmetic, and not the idea that, there's this idea of public health centers in your kid's school and offering public social services to your children in school, or, creating an avenue where your child can participate in various religions. But you don't have to worry, they will never encourage your child to practice Christianity in the school. That
would be a mixture of religion and faith.
That would be a mixture of religion and state, but as long as you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk,
singing bowl,
you can have your singing bowls, or you can do the lotus position, or you can, pray to the man in the moon. It's so weird that I think part of the goal is to move people away from, and again, this is part of that, critical theory aspect of moving people away from what is seen as the majority or normative. And if Christianity is seen as a normative religion or a part of that majority culture religion, how do we bring someone over from that into a Tibetan singing bowl? Because that's a minority religion.
I'm going to put a link in the description to my crash course on social emotional learning. If people are like, I've never heard of this, or I want to go deeper. Kelly's just kind of given us the 30,000 foot view here. But if you want to know more, I'm going to put that link in the description so people can check that out for more details. Let's talk a little bit more about also how this all fits with the whole school model, because these are not disconnected ideas, but as SEL comes into public schools, then there's this other component of establishing health clinics, mental health centers even I'm hoping we're going to get into like Illinois just passing this mental health screening as part of what they are going to do for every child in the public schools. But just first, let's get big picture. What is the whole school, whole child model?
Okay. So for everybody listening, it goes by the acronym WSCC, Whole School, Whole Community, Whole Child Model. These go by the name community schools, sustainable community schools, healthy schools. So they may have a series of different names, but ultimately it is a community school.
But all those terms sound very pretty. Like you were saying before, it's good marketing. All right, continue.
Phenomenal marketing. And what they're doing ultimately is they're joining healthcare and education. So it actually is a model that changes the way that communities are operating, centered around the school system. The school is designed to become the hub of every community where all government, welfare, and social services exist. The whole school, whole community, whole child is a principle of saying that the school has, and the proponents of this openly admit that they want to get away from reading, writing, arithmetic, and they want to be responsible for. So really it goes back to who is responsible for the child with regards to their nutrition, their health, their psychological and social, emotional well-being. Well-being is a big word that they love to use. And this joining of health and education is for equity. So for those familiar with the word equity, that's a loaded term as well. So we're talking about health equity and education equity combined. This really got its start. It has a long history moving forward, but why should parents be concerned? This model is wanting health clinics on the school's campus. And we again look at who is the provider of the services, what quality of services, is there a parent or guardian present while healthcare is provided? The answer is no. Parents are not there. So if you've ever been like myself in a situation where you went to a doctor and you needed a second opinion, or you needed to start asking a lot of questions before you got a vaccine or you got a particular medication given to you, all of those things we're saying now under the community school model through these school-based health centers that it is going to be regularly a child going with their friend or by themselves to their school-based health clinic and obtaining medical services at the health center. And it's marketed as a convenience model. Like, this is so convenient. Both parents have to work. So now the parent doesn't have to take off work. And this way the child can, go get a physical for sports team, or they bonked their head at PE and they can go and access the health services. Or it's marketed predominantly over the last 15 plus years. This healthcare service has been marketed as a way to allow children to have dental and eye exams. But in reality, the predominant feature of these is sexual and reproductive health care. And what does that mean? The way it's already shown to be in trainings and in other models of these school-based health centers, it is to advance the idea of promoting what I say is a false concept that a child, they say, could be born in the wrong body, and then to start both socially transitioning a child and even medically transitioning a child if the state legislation works in concert with that concept. So Washington State already does this. At Nova High School in Washington State, a group called Cardia, who, interestingly enough, is tied to comprehensive sexuality education. Cardia did a lot of the trainings in California for school districts that were bringing in a curricula called Positive Prevention Plus. Well, I started looking into it years ago and found Cardia had been also creating what they call a gender affirming model for Nova School, so that a 12-year-old in Washington could technically go to their school-based health clinic and access puberty blockers, et cetera, without their parents' notification or permission. 12.
Wow. It's really interesting, and it rolls right into the next thing that I want to talk about, because we've talked about SEL and this social emotional learning, and how are we caring for the whole child in that. But in bringing SEL over to that concept over to a whole child model, I think it's important how you mentioned, like, we need the whole community, we need the whole school, so that we can then produce a whole child. What's left out of that conversation is a whole family. So we don't get this idea that there's a mom and a dad that can produce a whole child, but that it's a community and a school that will then produce a whole child, leaving the family on the back burner while the community and the school might be teaching your child how to sing to a Tibetan singing bowl. There's a lot that gets overlooked and missed in this conversation. But California, interestingly enough, in support of the whole child, has now introduced a bill called AB 495. And this is really a bill that talks about caregivers. It was initially said to be put forward. One, we already have something similar to this already in law, but this expansion of that law really is meant for those who could be facing immigration crisis. How do we give caregiver status to people who may not be relatives of the child? And so AB 495 seeks to extend who can be considered a caregiver for the child.
Is this like in a scenario where maybe the child's at school, and while they're at school that day, the parents get deported, and so that then they need somebody to sign them out of school or take custody of them? Is that kind of the cover story here?
That's the cover story, but a lot of it really comes down to who can be called a caregiver, and who can consent to school-related medical services for a child. So this bill, while it is being put forward for the protection of kids who may have undocumented parents, it doesn't exclude anyone.
It's very broad.
It's very broad. And so because it's so broad, I might be able to have somebody else sign, to be able to be consented as a caregiver. But the boundaries of who can be a caregiver are very broad. And there's a lot of concern about that. And I just noted a couple of things, like erosion of parental authority, that it allows another adult to make certain medical or mental decisions for a child, which could bypass the parent's direct involvement in sensitive matters. Because now I'm signed on as a caregiver. Do you really need to go and get mom and dad's approval when you have your caregiver? Vague caregiver criteria. The bill doesn't require a close family relationship, creating the possibility that some with minimal connection to the child could gain decision-making authority.
So they could just go to the school, and I'm confused. Like they can go to the school. I'm trying to get a handle on this.
Well, this is why we have Kelly here, because I'm not a public school expert.
They could go there and just fill out some form and say I'm a caregiver, and then start.
Yeah, the way this is worded, it is so loosely worded that it has so many legal loopholes. And so I know several attorneys that have looked at this particular legislative bill, and they're very terrified. They said it's the most terrifying bill that they have yet seen because of the fact that it is so loosely worded. There's not even a background check required for the person to fill out the paper to assert the authority of themselves over a child, even to consent to surgery. And yes, it's being presented in one way, but
Hey, do you have a teen who is very curious about justice? Or are you looking to help empower and equip your teen to be able to have well thought out, biblically based, Christ-centered thoughts on justice? If so, check out our new Scripture and Society class that is geared just toward teens, ages 14 to 19 years old. We will hold these classes starting September 11th on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific. What we're going to do is go through two books, Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery and Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be a Young Anti-Racist. We are going to look at these books, compare and contrast them, but most importantly, we're going to hold them up against the mirror of Scripture to find out, how does Scripture talk about justice? How should we treat one another, the fellow image bearer? And what is the better path for human flourishing? For more information about our teen class, Scripture and Society, please go to centerforbiblicalunity.com to find out more information or to register. Thanks. And there's a bit of conversation around, does the parent actually need to know that the caregiver has even signed up to be this child's caregiver? I've seen certain things that say, yes, parents definitely will need to know and will need to sign off on it. But I've seen other things that say, no, the parent may not actually need to know. Do you have any insight on that?
As far as I know, I don't know, actually, the answer to that particular, whether or not, but from everything I've heard, it doesn't sound like it. The interpretation by the attorneys that I've heard speaking out broadly about this, they've said that this does not require any of that. Mm-hmm. And that's their grave concern, because if a child is now in the care of some stranger, that stranger can consent to all kinds of things. And like we talked about, the erosion of the family, we have been, as a state in California, as many other states too, it has been eroding the family and the parents for many, many decades. And I remember sitting in California at a Senate Education Committee hearing back in, when was that? I think it was early January of 2020. And I remember one of the men on the Senate Education Committee said to everybody in the room, and this is a paraphrase, but he basically said, "Parents, I'm glad you're here. It's good that you're speaking up, but there are people in this room who want to tell you or want to parent your child. And if you don't stay engaged, if you don't stay involved, you're going to lose the ability to parent your child."
Yeah.
And that was, I sat back in my chair and I thought, he knows something. What does he know? What is going on? But ever since 2019, we have seen a continued erosion of the involvement, the notification, the rights of parents. We're seeing CPS show up at the homes of parents who the school said did not use the proper new name or pronoun. And these things are happening. Whereas sadly, there's real issues that CPS has been called on. And I'm plenty aware that there's been real issues that people who work like teachers have told me about, and nothing was done. But these other issues. So we're looking at the conflict of, kind of like you said, Monique, the society being pushed in a way to operate through a lens of critical theory in many ways. Through that concept, a lot of times the family is seen as this systemic structure that is a problem. And many schools and teachers unions advocate that it takes a village to raise a child, which is very much what Hillary Clinton had said, as well as many others. And I remember a friend I interviewed, she said that she was going to the United Nations for many years, and she said that the F word at the UN was family, that is something that they were actively working against. And so we're seeing this widespread. And this is why all of us are even having this discussion, because we value the family. God values the family. He created family. And so it's important that we are well informed and equipped, that we understand the deceit of language that is happening, and we understand to arm ourselves with the tools and the ability to have that information and understand how we navigate this and what decisions we make that's best for our child and our family.
Part of the radical socialist agenda is to abolish the family. And what I think that, normal people, regular people just aren't aware of that tenet of socialism is abolish the family. But it makes sense as to why there's so much advocacy around trans issues, redefining male-female, redefining marriage, because all of those things are connected to God's definition of the family. So eroding parental rights just fits right in with that agenda. But I mean, let's maybe you could speak to, since you brought up the teachers unions. To me, listening to the head of the NEA, there's a lot of socialist kind of language there. And so I don't feel like we're not reaching for some innuendo by saying there does seem to be an agenda here of a pipeline of public schools to erosion of parental rights and trans issues. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
I want to jump in and just say NEA is the National Education Association.
Yes, they're the big teachers
Just
umbrella
make sure,
organization.
in case anybody out there was just a regular person like me.
Well, the president is a lady named Randy Weingarten, I think is her name, and she's always.
That's American Federation Teachers Union.
Okay. Because I see clips of her on X all the time. She just sounds like a socialist.
Yeah. The two main teachers unions, that's AFT and NEA. And it's actually interesting because the credit for the community schools model, it goes to two groups to bring health and education together. It credits the ASCD, which is going by that acronym, but it started as the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. It's a global organization. But what I've learned is that ASCD started in the National Education Association, started in the teachers union, branched off in the 1940s into its own separate group. But that's where it began. And the other side of this is the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And joining and marrying the two is very important to understand, especially because joining health and education for equity, many others have talked about this model in discussion of it, calling it a liberation or liberatory way of schooling. And the NEA has absolutely advocated for a lot of socialist concepts, and they refer to kids as our kids. So those things are important to notate. The other thing with ASCD is you could go on their website, you could type in many of the terms that are used today in the various mechanisms that critical theories, ideas, and intersectionality, et cetera, find themselves into the school system. You'll find those ideas in social emotional learning, in whole child education. Both of those two are integrated into one another. You'll find it by ASCD, the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. And these, it's interesting too. So both teachers unions are very involved with the promotion of community schools, as are Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, private hospitals, Blue Cross, Kaiser, which is one of the many groups that have been promoting and implementing surgeries, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, et cetera. And so all of the main players that are promoting many of these concerning ideas in society are very involved with the promotion and acceleration of community schools. Another big part of community schools is advancing Medicaid and expanding it. Ultimately, it is a government expansion model. One of their many other public-private partnerships is a group that wants to have every student in every grade, every school year, have a home visit from their school district. This could involve the school faculty or staff or school counselor, somebody from the school district coming into the home to then in turn discuss the child, discuss the family. But what questions do we need to ask? Is it the government's role to just come into our home? What data are they collecting? What are they notating about the family? Data collection is a big part of this puzzle too, because data is being taken in as our information on the family when students visit the health clinic. Data is being collected on children through social emotional learning. Oftentimes, there are schools that have data programs and they're determining a child's level of grit. They're determining how a child operates, and all of this data is being stored. And we're talking about teachers, many of whom got into the profession, not necessarily, there are teachers that are activist teachers that are absolutely promoting agendas, but there are teachers that don't want to be doing this. They understand that these many policies that are being brought into the school system are ineffective, problematic, and all of these things are coming in while students are suffering to, read, write, and understand mathematics and mathematical formulas, all at grade level. Many of them are struggling and they're falling behind. But all of these agendas are being brought to fruition. And so we have to continually look at who started this, what organizations are funding it, what grants are funding this, what data is collected, and how can I either choose another option for my children and my family, or how can I, if my children are entering this school system, best protect them and train them up so that they understand and assert their rights when they're at school, their right to say no, their right to not be part of something concerning.
Yeah, and that's even hard because it's like all my other friends are doing it. Like, why can't I go and do this thing, or why can't I talk to the people? And the group think can be very, very strong. And
but it sounds like it will be good for parents to have a conversation
definitely
with their child about, hey, if you're asked to participate in a survey of data collection, I'm telling you as your parent, it's okay to say no. And if the teacher insists, here's what you can say and you can call me, or like, it almost seems like that's a conversation that needs to be had. I also wonder about all these portals now that schools use.
I don't want to go down the portal route because that's a conversation that's just big and all by itself. And I know that we want to get there, but there's other pieces that can go into data collection. Yeah. And so we've talked about SEL and, the observation of children and how that can introduce new religion and, just different emotional techniques and even, the way in which teachers communicate with children to understand, like, are you struggling with same-sex attraction or transgenderism and things like that? We've talked about building a whole school and a whole community to support a whole child, but we leave out the whole family. We've talked about AB 495 and who gets to be a caregiver and what does that mean? The last thing that I want to talk about before we move in to the idea of data collection, because all of this stuff is data, it does collect information on our children, is Illinois' new law to require, beginning in the 2027-28 school year, requiring mental health screenings or assessments for all their children in 3rd to 12th grade.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
What my first question is can I opt out? And what? Okay, so what if my little Timmy just is a little odd? Like
Jamal.
What if where does that lie? And how professional are these people? Is it a mental health screening like a psychosocial history eval? Or are we doing, like, hey, here are 10 questions,
Or do you feel uncomfortable in your own body? Like something vague in general? Like,
how are they developing this assessment?
Yeah.
I
have questions.
I have a lot of questions, but my main question is can I opt my kid out? Because should nobody be talking to my kid on that deep a level without my permission? Help us understand, Kelly. Help us understand, because we have questions.
Yeah, I'm very concerned, and mental health has been discussed ever since COVID. A lot of people have been discussing it. But what I found interesting too was tracing back in 1998, there was an interview with a woman who was really involved in promoting community schools, and the interviewer asked her about mental health, and her response was, oh, she's talking about mental health. And the interviewer said, is that the big one? And her response was, oh, yeah, that's the big one. And in that moment, I'm trying to think back in 1998, what were they thinking? What were they planning? What were these ideas? Why was that called the big one? Right now, what we're all being told is that mental health is needed because of COVID and shutdowns, et cetera. But I also know that political strategy admissions over many years have said that they never let a crisis go to waste. And I often think many of these moments, these situations in life are often used exponentially to then incur an entire new societal change or something that they have been planning for a long time. So with mental health, it's important for people to understand that within the school system, I'd absolutely 100% be, if it was me sending my child to a school, any public school, I'd be learning every single opt-out that I could possibly send, and I would send it to the superintendent, the principal, every school teacher that my child may interact with. And then in that, I would send it through email and say, please confirm upon receipt within 3 business days. And if I do not hear from you with confirmation, I will be following up. And then I would keep a paper trail. I'd be following that with a paper trail. I would have the names of pro bono law firms right at the ready to contact to ask about what my rights are. I'd be training my child in their rights, especially their ability to assert their rights, to say no. We had, when our children were in the school district, after I had done a lot of extensive research in social emotional learning, my husband and I decided we were going to have a law firm help us create an opt-out, and they sent it to the school district. Guess what happened? Our kids, the following school year, were put right back in the program. So we had to then again get the attorney. But what was very interesting was our kids had come home one day and said, today was really fun. And I said, what did you guys do? And they said, we played tag by the sign. And I said, by the sign? You mean in the front of the school? And they said, yeah, on the grass in the front of the school. And I said, who was with you? And what class were you in? Were you guys together? And they said, we weren't with a grown-up. We were on opt-out time. We don't ever have a grown-up during opt-out.
Oh, wow.
And I'm listening to this thinking, that's right by the road. That's technically off campus. These are 2 little elementary school kids with no adult supervision at all whatsoever. So then we had to have a conversation with the school again. So this is where I say, treat an opt-out as a Band-Aid on a leak of a huge river or a huge dam, and be hypervigilant. I would treat, I'm a birder, so I'm going to use a bird example. If you were, if you see a nest of birds, smaller birds, songbirds, and a falcon's coming by or a larger crow that might be invading that nest, what are you going to watch? You're going to watch a huge amount of distraction or protection away from the nest to protect the baby birds. It's a distinctive behavior. And instinctive behavior. And I think it's important that parents understand that even if you choose to send an opt-out, you need to keep a paper trail and you need to remember to continue paying attention, because there were things during the opt-out, even with a law firm, that I learned were going on at the school that was essentially defeating the opt-out's purpose. So I always say opt-out is good, but it's often like a little Band-Aid on a big problem. Another thing with regards to the mental health piece, again, that's a lot of data collection, but I have yet to see a single mental health program in a school district that does not also believe that children can transition from one sex to another. And you'll often hear, we're trying to create a safe school, or we're having a safe school event, or we're trying to create a safe space, or this is a safe person. So one thing I want to share, if that's okay, I was given this by a public school teacher. This is called the I'm Here badge, and it is something that the National Education Association provides teachers. These are colors of various flags. And then
I want to
on the
describe
back,
it for the podcast a little bit. So it's the name badge that then has a lot of different flags, pride flags. It's not just the rainbow, but there's other pride flags on there. And
yeah.
then it has some messaging on the back. So
Yeah, this is the National Education Association's LGBTQ plus caucus. And it says proudly supported by NEA member benefits, California Teachers Association member benefits, the standard. And then it says CTA for California Teachers Association, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer caucus. And what it says right above the QR code is safe person, safe space. And this also aligns with safe schools. We had a situation where a group of parents were hearing about a safe school event. Students from 3 counties were being bused to one county to attend this event. Many parents thought this was school safety, talking about bullying, harassment, earthquakes, fire, all things what they thought was safety. But again, we always have to ask, what's the definition of the term and how are they using it? How might they be using it? So in this regard, they're using it and automatically it creates a situation. The sleeve that this comes in actually says if you are not a safe person, to not wear the badge. And so there's a little section here that allows a teacher to wear it around their neck with the rest of their school identification. But this QR code also goes right to a website that has a list of resources, including a Santa Clara, California, all ages transgender clinic. There was resources on there from Planned Parenthood Toronto, Canada, lots of different information. So when you hear school, safe person, safe space, safe school, sometimes they will have a safe schools event. It may be related to this. And one other note before I forget, family engagement is one of the big topics also discussed in schools, but it all depends on how the school or individual faculty may be using the word family, because schools do, and especially many teachers unions, believe that there could be a school family or a chosen family. So naturally, a parent would hear, oh, the community school model, they want family engagement. And in some ways, they might exercise that, but it's also important to understand some of them interpret family and the definition of family completely different. So it may not actually be to engage you. It may just be to create the family at school.
Hi, this is Kevin Briggins, Director for the Center for Biblical Unity. And we would like to invite all pastors and church leaders to a free webinar where we discuss how to lead your church through race and justice issues. One thing I've learned through my years in ministry is that these topics can be difficult in today's polarized culture and with various voices pulling congregants in many different directions. This is why we at the Center for Biblical Unity believe in equipping pastors to shepherd their flocks faithfully through these issues. We also believe it is important that we as Christians address race and justice from a biblical worldview. So join us September 9th as we discuss ways in which you can disciple your church on these issues while staying faithful to a biblical worldview. If this is something you believe is important, please register and also share it with someone else within your circles. Until then, grace and peace.
When we're thinking about mental health, you're hitting on many things that might be considered mental health in the school's context, but aren't actually what parents would be thinking is mental health related or the mental health support service that they would want for their child. So having on a I'm Here badge as a source of being a safe person in a safe school to produce a, whole and safe child might seem good on the surface and might seem like a way to, help bolster my child's mental health because they know that they're safe. But in reality, what they're doing, what they could be doing is promoting an ideology that you are not okay with, or talking to your children about things that are really not their responsibility or their lane to be in. My child's sexuality has nothing to do with whether or not you can teach them to read or to write. And so even looking at, the mandated bill in Illinois, where starting in the school year of 27 and 28, looking at, well, how can you opt out of this? Or how can you do the research to find out what is on those assessments? Are you okay with, your child being assessed by a mental health professional? Do you know this mental health professional? Are you sure that this mental health professional is actually a safe person for your child? It does seem like there could be some overreach, by the state. And then where does that data go that's collected? Does it stay with your child forever? They're in third grade and now they were deemed to be, whatever the psychosocial assessment says. Right. Does that stay with them forever is a question that I would be asking. So
right. And what are the qualifications of counselors?
Yeah, that's a question I have is who are these people? Yeah. And so much of this is maybe just a anecdotal impression, but it seems like a lot of what is passing for mental health assessments is getting a kid in a room and having them trying to draw out of them complaints about the adults in their life. That seems to be some of the ethos, at least of what I see on X when people post, what the snippets of what these assessments are. It doesn't seem to be traditional coping techniques of how do I become a more resilient person.
Well, I think part of what Kelly said a couple minutes ago, and I don't remember what the entire sentence was, but the word liberation really struck out to me. And so again, based on a critical theory model, if we see kids as oppressed people, the goal would be to liberate them
from the adults,
to liberate them from the adult oppression. It's called childism. So how do we liberate children? How do we free children to be their complete selves and things like that? A lot of those questions can get answered in community schools or in whole schools.
In those mental health clinics.
Because I'm seeking to learn, where is this child oppressed? Where is this child feeling oppressed or marginalized or not able to be fully, completely who they are? And so if that's the goal, then yes, targeting their parents or the adults in their lives may come as, just part and parcel with what all of these conversations are about.
And they're already working to train up peer counselors. So they want other students or even young college age, so that they're working in a joint effort with universities so that they're having peer counselors. And I know in Arizona, there was an account on Twitter that's done a lot of research into the fact that a lot of these counselors are not licensed. It's really interesting. I have a little quote I can read to you guys. The Chicago Teachers Union, on their website, they describe community schools and they say this: sustainable community schools come in through SCS, Sustainable Community Schools. We have an opportunity to humanize education in a way that is anti-racist and advances equity and justice. You've heard it takes a village to raise a child. SCS, Sustainable Community Schools, are the embodiment of that saying. They are community hubs designed to provide wraparound academic, health, and social support for the entire community beyond the traditional 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. school day. And
so they basically want to be like a social service center for your child and for your family. That's what it sounds like to me. That they want to get everybody involved in a social service wraparound program.
But here's the thing, that the child then becomes the main client, but there's no conversation about the family. So that makes me wonder if they're automatically seeing anyone connected to the child that is biologically related as a client, or are they seeing like my bio parents as something to be removed, an obstacle, so that they can get right to the child? Because again, you have a whole school, a whole community in order to produce a whole child. Well, where does the family fit in that?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the way that they're even talking about, they're already testing housing. They've talked about building housing on school campuses. Right now, there's discussions about some regions of the United States building housing for teachers, but there's also talk about building housing on school campuses for students. And this part of community schools, where they're open late into the evening, even weekends, to be fair to many good teachers don't advocate for this. And I don't even know that they want this. A lot of times when I hear from really good teachers, they're disappointed at the fact that there is so much data entry on their part that they feel like they're losing actual teaching instruction time to work with and tutor and help assist students so that they can, actually read and write and understand what they're being taught. And also many of today's restorative justice practices in schools too, for schools, teachers are seeing just problematic areas where things are not being handled always. And so I think adding more services to the school day, it's definitely a government expansion model, because it's all of these ideas of getting entire communities eventually, but predominantly students, like you said, accessing health services at the clinic. And it's very interesting because part of this change in these school-based health clinics, it does change healthcare. And I think it's a way that they're attempting to change healthcare, because any student that visits is going to be automatically asked about their gender identity and their sexual orientation and expressions. And this school-based health center model, they're being told to have conversations with every student. So they might come in because they bumped their head at PE, but what they're going to get is a conversation about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. They're going to get a conversation involving topics that you might find in comprehensive sexuality education. They're going to see the safe person safe space posters on the wall when they go into that school-based health clinic. And that is going to be the overarching feature. And one of the reasons why that has come to pass is because the very modern day design of these school-based health clinics is coming out of, if you were to follow kind of the family tree down, I started tracing back individuals that were on boards, individuals that were influential in community schools. And when you trace it back, it's not just schools partnering with Planned Parenthood. Today's full service community school model was actually worked on and developed by somebody who worked for Planned Parenthood Federation of America at their research arm. They were doing demography research and looking at the US Census data, and they were brought on by Planned Parenthood because they did this US Census data research, which then incurred, they were studying ways to increase the use of family planning services. And now they were working for Alan Guttmacher. For those that aren't familiar, previously these two were closely linked. And in any rate, that staff person was a chairperson for the Center for Population Options, which today is this very big organization called Advocates for Youth. And Advocates for Youth creates the national sexuality education standards. They manage these very explicit cartoon videos called amaze.org. And then that organization is the one who, again, we're following the family tree. We go Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Guttmacher, down to Advocates for Youth. And it was out of that group that this other organization really took root and started. And today that organization's name is the School-Based Health Alliance. They do a lot of these trainings and conferences and promotion of everything involving the school-based health centers and how they're run. So it's no surprise that the focus is sexual and reproductive health care, as they call it, which could include, providing kids with binders as well, providing kids with information on transitioning. Right now in California, I've already seen curriculum. This is just for 7th grade sex education, the comprehensive sexuality education that has links inside to tell kids if they want to transition, how to seek out legal support to emancipate themselves from their parents so that they can in turn start this process if their parents aren't supportive. So we're talking huge, huge agendas. And this is why I say, I gave that example earlier in the podcast about a birthday present. I think about this in terms of anything in life that we really care about, whether it's water we drink or food that we eat. We are oftentimes going to seek out the source. You're not going to go eat at a restaurant that just was reopened after the health department shut it down because it was filled with rats, right? I'm just saying it's an extreme example, but in the same way, it's important for us to think about who are the sources of these new ideas? Why do they exist? How do I opt out? How do I teach my child to say no? I know one mom with the school-based health center, because many schools are encouraging this. They're telling students that they are going to do a tour of the new wellness clinic or the school-based health center. And when they do this tour, they a mom said that she tells her child, just tell them you're not going. And if they have any questions, they can call me or you can call me right then and there. Do you want me to call my mom right now? Because I don't think my mom wants me to go to this and I don't really want to either. So those skills, those tools, it's sometimes difficult though for kids to understand or to go against a whole group. We talked about groupthink earlier. But yeah, there's plenty of reasons by and large to be very concerned about this model.
And there's so much we could talk to you for another hour, but we got to wrap. But
All right.
Thank you, Kelly, for coming back on with us and giving us some updates about what's emerging. So I'm taking away from all of this, woke has not been eliminated. There is still issues in our schools, and we have to be aware. We're not doing this conversation to fearmonger or as some sort of fear porn, as they say. This is not about that. It's just about being informed so that you can make wise choices with your kids and having good conversations with them and researching what it looks like in your district. And sometimes these things are hard to find. Sometimes it's not always easy to figure out what your school district is doing. My recommendation is always telling parents a good place to start. Go on the district website, search for the word equity, and see what pops up. That's a good first place to start. There's not always a ton of transparency with school leadership. You have to be a little bit persistent and dig, but you want to be informed about what is happening in your area, in your district. Don't assume that because you live in a small town, this isn't happening. Mm-hmm. So any final word you want to say, Kelly, before we go?
I will add to that a really great way parents might see a school going into a memorandum of understanding or contract with an organization. Go to the organization's website, but also go to the organization's social media accounts. See if the organization is on LinkedIn. And also, let's say ethnic studies is coming into your school. Go on Instagram, type in the # or what today is called a hashtag, and without any spaces, type ethnic studies. Type ethnic studies now and see what comes up. And sometimes you'll see plenty right there. You might even be able to find it in your own district. You might find different, go on X or Twitter and search and see if any of these organizations your school might be partnering with are there. And then from that profile, you can search, like Krista just said, you might search your board agenda for the word equity, but you can search their social media account on X in the same manner. And that might also help you find more information of the particular organization's ideas. If you need any help, anybody out there, don't hesitate to send me a Facebook or Twitter message. I like being able to help if there's something you're looking for. So thank you for having me today, you guys.
Thanks for coming on. I just want to reiterate, we are not trying to fearmonger. And we know that we highlighted things that are happening in California and Illinois, but these are progressive states. It's only sadly a matter of time before these things
they're in Texas too.
Sifted through.
They're in the red states too.
It's definitely there. It is about finding it. Yeah. But please don't think that this is not coming to your public school, because sadly, that's the reality. It is. So Kelly, thanks so much for being on. And Krista, it's good to be back with you.
Yeah, I made it.
She made it, y'all. And with that, we will see you next week. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
There's nothing